Everyday injustice. Too many wrongful convictions. Corruption has infected the criminal justice system, leaving too many people helpless, fighting for their lives. Instead of receiving justice, people suffer. Is that why they say justice is blind?
Today on Everyday Injustice, we have Kevin Cosney. Kevin's going to be talking about two very important propositions that are coming up as we record this in less than 20 days, which I can't believe. But it is what it is. Um, so, you are the Associate Director of California Black Power Network, and you're working with the Million Voters Project. I, I kind of wanted to get your background and how you got involved in this stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, I have been engaged in organizing work and work to improve our community since like a teenager, right? And it really started in high school and really informal when dealing with white supremacist and racial issues on campus. And really just organically kind of working with other friends and peers to figure out how we can make an impact and a difference on how we were being treated by school administrators, by police, and that work continued throughout college and afterwards. Working for various different issues from primarily around how do we bring more investments into communities and reverse the trend of tough on crime and punishment versus healing and investments in communities. So yeah, after I graduated college, I was working in San Bernardino for community resource centers, and it was really difficult working at a community resource center in a community that didn't have resources. And it really pushed me into the arena of saying we need to fight for systemic changes, right? I was doing a lot of service work and really putting band-aids on deep wounds. And this was back in 2010. And was really fed up and knew that there was something more that had to change. There was more shifts that were needed to really revitalize our communities. At that point, I started volunteering with an organization that was doing deep voter engagement and working towards those types of systems change. They were one of 12 organizations that were part of California Calls, which was a multiracial alliance of grassroots organizations working to build power in communities of color and fight for reinvestments in our communities. And so it was speaking to my heart. It was speaking to my experience, and joined that. Was doing phone banking, canvassing, and various other efforts around voter engagement through the local organization there, and eventually joined the California Calls team back in 2012. And we were working on ballot initiatives like Prop 30, which was about, again, bringing investments back into our communities, things like Prop 47, which was a huge shift in being able to move from tough on crime into community investments. Throughout that work, we knew and understood that there were not enough Black-led organizations at the table doing the work to scale. And so we started programs to build up the capacities of Black-led organizations. Folks at that table essentially said, hey, there's a lot of opportunity for us to make a statewide impact, lift up the power of Black voters in the state, make sure we're lifting from the bottom, right? Those that are most impacted by the various issues we're working on need to have a voice in all of these decisions. And so there's a longer story to it, but essentially those conversations led us to expanding out. We went from a cohort of 12 Black-led organizations to now a coalition of over 40 Black-led and serving organizations across the state. Again, really working to build Black political power, shift hearts and minds. And now we've also linked up with the Million Voters Project, which is a coalition of many other statewide coalitions like ours, to make sure that we're aligned and amplifying the work across the state to build, again, political power in our communities, to really create, right, the communities that we know we need and the systems that we know will serve our communities better.
And so I'm going to ask in a minute, what you guys are doing in this current election cycle, But first, let's talk about Prop 5, Prop 36. We've covered both of these propositions pretty heavily. And so what is Prop 5? What does it do? And then why are you supporting that? And then the opposite for Prop 36, you're opposing that, and talk a bit about that as well.
Absolutely. There's a lot at stake in this election, and each ballot measure is important in and of itself. But I think that this election is really about the heart and soul of California, the direction of California, what way we as a state will go, and what direction we as a country will go. And I think over the last decade, we've been paving a different way for California. And I think this is really the struggle of what is the California way, right? Do we continue to invest in communities and the things that we need, or do we revert back to tough on crime and punishment, right? And so, in a lot of ways, Prop 5 and 36 are connected. In essence, to answer your question, right? Prop 5 is really about democracy at the end of the day. It's about, do we allow a minority of voters to dictate whether or not we have housing, or can we allow for democracy, right? Can we allow for majority rule? So Prop 5 will take the voter threshold from 2/3 vote to pass new housing bonds and infrastructure bonds down to 55%, right? So it's really just about majority rules. It's really about who gets to decide if we're going to invest in housing and infrastructure. And so that's all it is. It really puts the power in voters' hands to say, is this something that we want or something that we don't want? Prop 36 is really, again, this fight of the direction of California. Do we, you know, invest in communities, invest in programs and services and the things that we have known and have now been proven to actually reduce crime and create healthier, more thriving communities? Or do we go back into the failed policies of the 80s and 90s of the war on drugs and tough on crime? Prop 36 is part of a 10-year effort of law enforcement lobby to roll back gains we made in 2014 with Prop 47. Again, Prop 47 helped reduce low-level nonviolent felonies down to misdemeanors. We saved over $800 million over the last 10 years through Prop 47 that was then reinvested into programs and services like substance abuse programs, mental health programs, education, prevention, education programs, and crime survivor services. Again, and we've proven that through those programs, folks are less likely to commit crimes or recommit crimes, far more likely to be employed and housed with those types of services. Prop 36 will reintroduce long mandatory sentences for low-level drug and theft crimes, and will ultimately lead to hundreds of thousands of more people being incarcerated. We project 10,000 more people going to prisons, 150,000 more people going to jail every single year. We are already spending as a state 22 billion with a B dollars on incarcerating folks. This would add $5 billion every single year to that tab. So it would be a huge investment, really the largest ever one-time investment in our prison system. And in doing so, would eliminate over $100 million every single year in programs and services that, again, we've been proven to actually reduce crime and actually allow for our communities to thrive and be healthy.
I want to ask you one question before I kind of shift gears, and that's about Prop 5, because one of the really interesting developments I've seen in the last 5 years, and I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this now for 18 years. You didn't really see housing issues take up the same space as criminal justice issues, and it always seemed to me a mistake, because one of the things we do is we go into court and we watch court cases. And I can tell you, I don't want to put a percentage, but it's high. The number of people that are housing insecure who are either homeless or in danger of becoming homeless or quasi homeless, who are also in the criminal legal system. And for a long time, housing was kind of treated separate, silo from criminal justice. And now, finally, I think people have kind of caught on, especially with the housing crisis in California, that unless we can deal with affordable housing, we're not going to be able to deal with criminal justice reform.
That's right. No, I mean, and it's to your point, it's unfortunate that those ties have not been made more explicit and more often, because they're deeply tied, and it's very much a cyclical thing, right? We certainly know that from the California Black Power Network's perspective, right? We know that the prison system is disproportionately Black, but it's nearly 100%, maybe like 99% poor, right? And so when we think about the links between poverty and our prison system, right, it's right in front of our face. And certainly not only are folks, right, more likely to be housing impacted, right, and housing unstable in the justice system, but we also know that folks coming out of the justice system are also far more likely to experience homelessness and housing instability, right? And so it's this piece of the poor getting poorer, and we know that if we're taking care of folks' basic needs, they're less likely to have to resort to extreme measures to get their basic needs. And I think one of the things that's most telling about the state of things in California, there's these kind of viral clips around retail theft, but if you go into any store, the things that are locked up are deodorant and toothpaste and underwear. It's the basic needs that folks are struggling with. And we're coming out of this pandemic that created not only economic strife, but deep emotional and mental health strife, right? People are losing folks, they're losing jobs, they're losing housing. And the solution is to offer folks support, not criminalize the poverty that has been thrust upon them, in particular over the last 4 or 5 years.
And we're now seeing, efforts by the state to clear these homeless encampments, and kind of, the Supreme Court has greenlit, the governor's efforts to almost criminalize homelessness. And I was just looking this up yesterday by happenstance, but people that are incarcerated are 10 times more likely to end up homeless than the general population. I mean, these things are so intertwined, and yet we're not really dealing with them systemically.
That's right. And at the end of the day, um, people are paying for these things with their lives, right? The folks that are impacted, and taxpayers are paying for these things either way. So oftentimes you hear, well, why do I have to? You are paying for it. Your tax dollars are going to the sweeps, right? Your tax dollars can either go to housing people, or it can go to housing them in jails while their things are thrown away, while their dignity is tossed to the side. And it is really about what state do we want, right? How do we envision this, and what is the way that we want to govern and treat our neighbors? And so I think that it's imperative for us to really call these things out and say the California way is about investing in our communities. It's about investing in people, not investing in prisons and punishment and things that deny people of basic human rights and dignity.
And toward that point, it costs about 3 or 4 times more to house somebody in a jail or a prison than it is to put them in permanent supportive housing. I
That's
mean,
right.
so if your concern is money, you're not even spending the money the right way.
Prop 36 is not only bad policy, it's bad business, right? It's bad on all fronts.
So the big question is, what are you guys doing about all this stuff, especially in the last 20 days?
Absolutely. There is an uphill fight and an uphill battle, but we are throwing down. The Million Voters Project is set out to mobilize 87 organizations across the state, engaging voters every day by phone, knocking on doors, through social media. We have about 1,200, almost 1,300 organizers out in the field now, engaging as many people as we can. And so while the law enforcement lobby and the corporate lobby are spending millions on ads, we're working to mobilize millions of voters in service of this. So we plan to engage just shy of 400,000 voters to help turn the tides on these propositions just through our direct voter contact alone, on top of really trying to get the word out through social media, through influencers, and anything that we can do to help make sure that our communities know the truth, know what's happening, and know how to get and stay engaged.
Wow. So what are you hearing out there? I mean, what kinds of conversations are going on? What are people's concerns? I mean, obviously, we know that there is a concern about crime. I happen to believe a lot of it's overblown, and that if you look at the actual data, crime's going down. And I have big problems with the retail theft thing because I think it's really been misconstrued. But what are you hearing out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Just really to lift up the point, right, that a lot of things have been really misconstrued and overblown. I think that honestly, there's a lot of confusion. And I think a lot of folks who want more information, and that's why we started to do what we do, is to provide that information because it is confusing, right? The language of Prop 36 and the way that its proponents talk about it are ultimately really deceiving, right? And the more that we pull that back, the folks are able to easily see, oh, wait, this is not what they're saying it is. This is not about treatment. This is about mass incarceration. Um, and this is not the solution that we want to see. One of our organizations was knocking on doors in the LA area, and they were reflecting on how folks can kind of hold these two positions, these two understandings at the same time, and that accountability and safety and community investments are not contradictory, right? So they were knocking on doors, and folks were fully in support of making sure we're investing in communities, not investing in prisons, but we're also like, be safe out there, right? So there's a recognition that our communities are not perfect, but our community members also know that tough on crime, this kind of punishment model is also not the solution to what we need. And so there's some confusion. There's some folks that we talk to that are undecided. And that's mostly because what they hear is, from the ads and from reading about things, is not actually what things are doing. And so the more that they dig in, they're saying, well, hold on, this is not what they said it was. And so we have been really getting overwhelming support from a majority of people that we talk to on both 5 and 6. Sorry, Prop 36. So certainly kind of different from what we're seeing in polls. I think our communities, again, once they get the facts, are like, oh no, this is not it. And so it's encouraging to see that level of excitement and understanding once we start to dig into the conversations.
So you're optimistic.
I wouldn't be in this work if I wasn't somewhat of an optimist. We're up against a lot, right? And we've always had to make a dollar out of 15 cents, and trying to find a way out of no way. So I'm cautiously optimistic. There's a lot of fight that we have ahead of us, right? I will say that the opposition has had 10 years of trying to drum up this type of rhetoric, this type of fear mongering. And I think it was after the pandemic that they were able to get some traction because, folks were reacting to really tough circumstances. And so, I think the concerns are real. People are concerned about what do we do with loved ones who are addicted and struggling with substance abuse. There are real concerns out there, but the more folks dig into it, they're realizing that this is not the real solution. The real battle is a race against time. Do we have enough time to reach as many people as we can and get the message out, to do that work of informing people about the truth behind these pieces? I think there's concerns around on both sides, Prop 5 and Prop 36, around tax dollars and how much we're spending on X, Y, and Z. And when you drill down to it, David, you said it perfectly, right? Our money is better spent in investing in community, it's cheaper, and it creates better results in all of the outcomes that we're looking for, and it improves people's lives, right? And that's has to be most important.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I've been having a lot of these conversations lately. I was just at San Quentin last week for their film festival, and one really interesting thing is to kind of pause and look at how far we've actually come, because listening to the warden and the former warden there, it was eye opening, because it was a very different mindset. And you're sitting in this room of 250 people, 150 from the outside and 100 inside, and it's intermixed. So like, I'm sitting with incarcerated people on both sides, and we're having conversations and we're laughing together and we're enjoying the films and such. Um, and I was talking to somebody yesterday about public defense work, and the fact that 15 years ago when I first started this, nobody had social workers. They didn't know what holistic defense was, and so we've come this long way, and yet it feels like we keep circling back to this tough on crime rhetoric. Every time the crime rate creeps up, everybody gets scared. And then the people that make the money off fanning the flames get to fan the flames, and they're very good at it. Um, and how we counter that, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And to be honest, right, crime rates, right? I know this is, facts and figures don't always move folks, but right, we know that crime rates have been down, right? And the fact is that there are there's been this push, right, to lift up this crime spike narrative that says crime is going up because of Prop 47, when it actually hasn't, right? And they were doing this for 10 years, right? Even when crime was going down, it was plummeting, and we have the numbers to show that. And so this effort uh to bring back tough on crime has been existing with or without any increase in actual crime. I think the fact that it's catching traction now is just because of the virality of certain things that we've seen on social media or on the news. Now, I think what is important to note, right, is that the people behind things like Prop 36, for instance, the DA's association, the sheriff's associations, the correction officers association, and companies like Walmart. Philip Morris is now kicked in, which is a wild turn of events. But also Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Associations. There's this long term effort to continue to you know fill, right. We know that at this point there's 15,000 empty beds in our state prison systems. We're getting poised to close these prisons, and we know that that means that's job security for the law enforcement lobby. And I don't know if I can do this, but a shout out to Prop 6 that's also on this year's ballot, that's about ending free labor slavery in our prison systems, right? We know that this is not only jobs for those who benefit off of the criminalization of our communities, but folks who are profiting off of and exploiting the labor of those who are incarcerated. So when there are 15,000 empty beds and prisons that are going to close, that means, those folks who are running those prisons are looking for job security, and all of the corporations who are invested in that free labor are also invested in making sure that those prison beds are filled up. So we've seen this rhetoric and this narrative with or without any change in crime, even when crime is going down. And it's important to understand the motives of those folks who are pushing this lie.
And I'm just going to, add another point here that we haven't really hit on, is the fact that you guys are not just, getting people that are already involved in voting and stuff out, but you're actually mobilizing new voters, and that's absolutely critical toward changing the system.
Absolutely. And I mean, and that's part of it, right? Is that for a long time, a lot of our communities are not engaged in the electoral process, and it creates this cycle of disengagement where certain campaigns will only go to quote unquote likely voters. They only poll likely voters, and they do turnout efforts with likely voters. And then they see that likely voters were likely to vote and other communities were not. And we're saying, well, actually, if we actually get more of our communities involved, then we actually have a fuller democracy, and the decisions that are made in Sacramento or local cities and counties are actually more reflective of the needs of our communities. We know that those who are closest to the pain are closest to the solution. It's just about getting you closer to decision making power. And that is certainly the efforts of the California Black Power Network and the Million Voters Project, is to engage those who are less engaged. And we know that those are the folks that understand it. They get it. They see these things in their everyday lives, oftentimes don't see things change, but these propositions are the most direct way to make deep change in our community. So it is absolutely about getting those out to vote who don't normally vote, who don't who aren't being engaged, right, by different campaigns, so they can hear the information, they can hear the truth, and make their own decisions on what's right for their communities.
And how successful do you feel like you've been this cycle in terms of getting new people involved?
Yeah, I think our teams are doing a great job out there, and they're having a lot of great conversations. And it's interesting to see because it happens at all levels. And so we're engaging folks who don't normally aren't normally engaged. And it's interesting because there's sometimes this rhetoric of, oh, you'll hear it in the news or the kind of chattering political class, say, oh, they don't care, they don't, voters are apathetic. But go on a canvas walk with us, and you'll see voters who won't let our canvassers go because they have not had these conversations. No one is knocking on their door. And so when we do, they're engaged, they have questions, they have thoughts, they want to get involved. We have thousands of people who want to volunteer with us, right? And so people are hungry for this information. They're hungry to get involved, they're hungry to stay engaged. And so not only are we seeing that on in regards to our voters, but just even throughout this year, we're seeing folks who started as volunteers who are now dedicated to this work and who are now maybe even leading teams themselves. So not only are we getting our community more involved, we're developing other leaders within the state that can help amplify this work and get to more and more people, which is that's the long goal.
And we know this stuff works. I mean, we saw what happened in Georgia in 2020, and the efforts of Stacey Abrams. So
Mhm.
so this type of thing actually works. It's just a matter of getting back to the good old grassroots organizing. And from the perspective of the Vanguard, which is a nonprofit, and so we don't weigh in on elections, but we like to provide information about various things. Are there ways for people to get involved in the project even now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always ways to follow Million Voters Project, Voters Project Action Fund on social media. And you can go to the website and sign up to make sure that you can get plugged into other opportunities that we have to stay involved. And so I think that would be the kind of easiest way is to, again, follow us as Million Voters Project online. You can follow California Black Power Network, BLK Power Network on IG, Instagram, and social media. Again, you can go to millionvotersproject.org to again learn more and get signed up. And through that, you'll be able to get plugged in to other volunteer efforts. And then spread the word, right? I think talking to friends and families is the most important, right? No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And being able to just talk to you, have the conversation at the dinner table, have the conversation with friends and families, Sunday when you're watching a football game or whatever you do in your spare time, have the conversations. And I think that's most important.
All right. Well, thanks, Kevin, for coming on and sharing your exciting work. I really admire the work that you guys are doing. I think it's vital. We need to do this in all 50 states across the country, really get people involved, because That's the only thing that's going to save our democracy.
Absolutely. And they say, as California goes, right? And so this is an opportunity for us to really define what the California way is, what the California model is, and how that has actually benefited our communities. And there's proof of that. And this is a time for us to stand firm on that. And so the rest of the country, what investment in communities actually looks like and how it benefits us all. So appreciate the time, David. And I look forward to folks reaching out to us and getting involved any way you can.
Well, we've been talking about Prop 5, which addresses affordable housing and majority votes for affordable housing. And we've been talking about Prop 36, which partially rolls back Prop 47, which we didn't talk about that much. But we've been talking with Kevin Cosney of California Black Power Network. This is Everyday Injustice. I'm your host, David Greenwald. Join us again next time for more tales from the injustice system.
Thank you to George Powell and Norman Mousequake Barrett for the use of our opening, Everyday Injustice. You can see more of George's music at www.justiceforgeorgepowell.com.